This next one we're going to do is actually the jump for the character. We've already got two of our setups, like a kind of a rough setup for the jump. We can actually check for just a single jump as a standard walk jump, and then we've got the run jump. Let's go ahead and just block in the next one. If you remember, we were going to have three jump types. The third one is going to be jumping from a crouch position. So for this one, let's go ahead and create one more if statement here. And we'll go ahead and do again the input get button down. And for this, we'll call it the jump option again. Alright, now for the crouch, if you remember our current move direction order, to actually do the crouch, we were checking for the vertical being pushed down, but also for velocity to equal 0. So for this, we could do a simple check. We could say that if the jump button is pushed, and we could also say that and if the velocity dot x is going to be equal to 0, and if it's equal to 0, and we can also do one more check. We can say that, and also if the input, we'll say the get axis is vertical. So if we have our axis on vertical and it's the just like we did before, it's less than 0, then we're checking for all the possibilities of making sure that the crouch is actually happening. So if there's no movement on velocity left and right, if the up and down is actually pushed down, and if the jump is actually being pressed, then if all of those elements are true, then we could do a jump crouch. Alright. So if they actually do a jump crouch, then we can actually set up our velocity like we've done with the other ones. We'll say velocity y is now going to equal the crouch jump. There we go. So by doing this, this is going to allow us to, if we push save, when we go in here and we play it. Alright, so we have our standard jump, we have our run jump, which goes a little higher, then we have our crouch jump, which goes just a little bit higher. So that allows us to actually have all three different types of jumps whenever we push any three of the combinations. However, when we start getting into this, when you have a wider range of possibilities of making sure one of these is turned off, one of the other ones is turned on, something kind of comes into the mix, and this is going to be something that if we were to just use this and we start playing the animations, you'll notice one animation playing over on top of the other animation and allowing that one to play, is that we haven't completely turned off each of these with a new one set into place. Let me make this a little bit wider here. So for the first one, let's go ahead and just turn off all the other possibilities. We're going to check to make sure that there's nothing else that could be used in it. So for the very first one, the standard jump, when it gets for the get button down jump, and when it checks for the next part, which is checking for the fire, let's go ahead and just make this into a larger statement. We're going to check for not only that, we're going to check for an additional few elements here. So we'll say that if the fire button isn't pushed, so inside of this statement right here, let's say, or if the button is pushed but velocity is set to 0. So we want to make sure we check for both cases, the crouching and the running statement. So if it's not a run one, then we'll say also if it is a get button option, and we're saying we're checking for fire. Alright, and this is something that I would suggest not just watching me go through this, but just pause for a little bit and see if you can figure out the right setup for it. What might help also is actually having the animations in right now. That way you can actually see when one's working and one's not working. You can also put in a print statement inside of each one, and just double check that the print statement is only printing the right one in the right spot. Alright, so if we have our check here, let me scroll over here a little bit. So our first part of the check again is saying that if the button isn't pushed, the fire button, meaning the run button, isn't pushed, or the run button is pushed, but the movement is actually the movement is also set to 0 for the velocity. So we'll say end, and we'll just call up our velocity here. And the velocity is going to be checking for the x, meaning that left and right is equal to 0. Alright, so we've checked for those. Now we have our check for our buttons there. The other check that we want to make is that the vertical is also greater than, because like right now we're actually checking for vertical being down, so we have to make sure that vertical's either equal to 0 or greater than 0. Okay, so we'll do one more check here. We'll say that if the input.getAxis is going to be vertical, and if the vertical axis point is greater than or equal to 0. So that's basically checking for everything that we currently have. And again, I'll stretch it out here so you can see it. So we are checking for a jump, and then we're checking to make sure that it's not the fire button, or it's the fire button and the velocity is equal to 0. And then we're also checking that it is either greater than or equal to the vertical for the movement. Alright, so if it's all of these things right here, and all that equates to true, then we can actually get the walk jump happening for it. Alright, now the other ones aren't as bad just because they require a little bit different on there. So this one, since we've added this to it, all this needs to do is actually check that velocity isn't actually at 0. So for instance, we could say if the jump button is pushed down and they're running, let's just add one extra element here. We'll say that also, and if velocity .x isn't equal to 0. Meaning that the run jump is it requires you to actually be running in order to actually use the jump, or if anything, at least being able to have the button pushed down. You could set it so that the velocity would have to be in a movement state, like to a certain number of movement before it would jump. But we're setting it so that if it's not 0, then you can't just actually stay in one place and try jumping with a run. You have to actually be moving at least somewhat. All right. Okay, and then the last one, this one's already set just because it's the difference that it is checking for no movement, and it's checking for a downward push on the vertical side. All right. So if we have that, in terms of inside of here, it's gonna at the moment it's gonna react the same, as it will still have the same options to be able to jump and run. We can run and jump, and we can standard jump. Alright, so that gets us going on our jumps. Now, the jumps themselves, if you remember, is that this jump is actually not just, this doesn't actually control the player. This just simply initiates a jump state, so that the player will begin jumping and leave the ground. What we want to do for one more part here, thinking ahead here, is that when I've got my statements on this part, easiest way to make this work is to actually just turn on and off a true-false statement. So what we could do is set that when the player initiates a certain type of jump, we'll actually just enable a walk jump, a run jump for it. So let's go ahead and go back up to the code here. And going through the code, let's actually just set a couple more private variables, because we'll just call these up inside of here. So private variable wise, let's do a jump enable. And for this one, here we go. We'll just set this to a boolean, and we'll make it equal to false. Alright. And for this, we could even just push Control D for mine, which just makes a duplicate of the line above. I just want to make another one for this. This will be a run jump, and this will be a crouch jump. Alright. So again, if you notice, I already get to the point where we're running over on that side of it. That's just one of those things that you can kind of just be watching while you're doing it to be sure that's going to work out right. And same thing for this, when we start setting values that are longer than just those. You could go back in again and you could tab these over just so that they're nice and separate and easier to read. Alright, there we go. So we have all of our, we're going to have all the jumps set to false to start with, because we don't want to actually have anything happening on that unless a key is pressed or one of the actions we've created actually occurs. So let's see, let's go ahead and take those. We can take each one of the jump types and we can set it to true down inside of the jump option. So at the moment, the only thing we have is just simply saying that the velocity is either a walk, the walk, jump height, the run, or the crouch. So let's add to each of these. And this one, being the standard jump, we'll just call up the jump enabled. So we'll say jump enabled is going to be true. And then same thing for the next one. We'll say that the run jump enable here is going to equal true. And last one, crouch. And the crouch jump enable is going to equal true here. Alright, now when we actually enable these, we can actually do checks inside of our is grounded being false, and we'll just say that if it's jump enabled, then we do the jump enable. If it's the other one, then we do the other one. There is a part though, is that when we start setting these to true, and just thinking about the code itself, is that when I set this to true, there's nothing inside of my update function to actually set this back to false. So in order just to make sure that every time your character is grounded, that it always just goes back to false, let's go ahead and just add a couple of the statements up here. So again, we'll just do the jump enable here. And we'll just set this one to false. And same thing for the other ones. So we'll just do we'll do the run jump enabled here. And set it to false, and the crouch jump enabled. That means that every time an action occurs, so the moment I have one of these happen, once the player lands back on the ground, touches down, all of them get set back to false again. Alright, so this will kind of help us keep from having any issues or anything when the player lands back on the ground, and like having one of these reopen back up is to true. Alright, so at this point we have our jumps working for us in terms of the type and the setup for it, and we've got our option to turn on and set up the jump option once they're up in the air. Alright, and this is going to allow us to actually control the animation side, the height, and all that stuff. Alright, so with this said, let's go ahead and move on to the next part, which will be going and creating all the code for the character in air. So inside of the air jump, so that once he's in the air, he's not on the ground anymore. Let's do a couple of lines here. We're gonna expand this quite a bit, but just to start off with, if we want controlled jump, so for instance, like on this, we didn't define any kind of controlled jump, but if you think about Mario, is that the longer you hold the button down, the higher the player goes before he goes back down. So an easy way to do that, let's think about just a simple way here. We could actually say that on an input, so we'll say if input.getButton up, so we're going to do an up one, meaning that when you release the button. So whenever you let go of the jump button, let's actually create a simple way to have the character get lowered back to the ground. Alright, so the moment you push up on the, you release the jump button, we could actually set our velocity, and again we'll just set the Y velocity on it, and we'll make the Y velocity equal the velocity minus our fall speed. Again, if you remember our fall speed from up here, we had the fall speed, where is it at? Right there, and it's set for 2. So we're going to move them up just about as quick as we move them, we're going to move them down about as quick as we move them up when they're jumping. Alright? So the fall speed is just simply going to allow it so that the moment you let go of the mouse button, when he's up in the air, he'll start to move back down. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at that one real fast. And here, we'll go ahead and play it. So if you push and hold your jump button, he's going to jump the standard height. But if I push just slightly, notice how he doesn't jump as high. So I can jump all the way up to this line when I hold it down. If I just tap it, he just goes to about halfway. Alright, and he can do the same thing for the crouch jump. So if you jump all the way, or if you just jump a little bit. Alright, he'll do the same for all three of those. Alright, so really easy line of code, but it definitely adds a lot to it for the functionality for kind of making it similar so that you have more of that button smashing where you feel like you have to push the button to make him do something and hold it down. Alright, so that'll be a simple line right there. Let's go ahead and comment on that one real fast. We'll just put on here. It's the jump controlled height. And all we're doing at this point is just subtracting the current height from the button jump up. So we'll just do a current height from 1 if jump button is up. Alright. And so that's going to give us that part. Let's go ahead and get into the regular jumps here. We know that our statements are just going to be checking for whether something's been enabled. So for instance, if jump enable, so the standard jump, and define this one while we're doing it. So the standard jump, and on our standard jump, what we're looking for is the speed for the left and right movement. So for instance, like right now, inside of our, if the character is off the ground, let's make sure we actually set this below here. So if you want to take a look at this for a moment, we're just kind of move down to our code here, right here. The velocity x, just like on the one up there when the character's on the ground, we took this one off and we were placing it just inside of each of the statements. Same thing for here. So we'll take this one off, we'll leave this one out as the, we'll drag this up to the top here. So the velocity will stay up here. It's going to be consistent with all of the jumps. So inside of the jump, the only thing that we actually need to do when it gets to the standard jump is tell it to go for the left and the right, and the speed at which it needs to go. So we'll just say the velocity on the x is just going to be multiplied by the, for us we could just do the walk speed for now. And looks like it's kind of messing up on that part. There we go. So we'll have the walk speed multiplied by it, so that'll be the speed of the left and right control that you actually have of it. And we'll just place that on there as well. So we'll just say this can be walk speed times current move speed. Alright. And then we can go ahead and fill the rest of them out because they're going to be very similar to this. So we'll go ahead and just place these in, then we'll place in the animation frames for each one as well. So again, this one, next one is going to be the run jump enabled. So if run jump enabled is true, then we want to actually have the character's velocity, and the velocity on the x is going to equal the times equals, and we could do a run speed. We could also do just a we could do a different type of speed. We're just going to do the run speed because we already have the variable there. But you could do a velocity speed for in the air separate of this speed. That way you can have a little bit more control of it. Alright, I'll go ahead and comment on these as well. And this one, this is just going to be the say run jump speed. Alright, actually this will be the speed down here. Okay. And the last one we'll do is going to be the crouch jump enabled. And this one, for the crouch enabled, we're just going to do the velocity, again, velocity Y, but or velocity on the X, but the only difference on this one is that what we want to have happen on it is we're just going to make it the walk speed, so that there's a little bit of a discount for the player. If they were to actually crouch down, they shouldn't be able to move very fast to the left or the right, so we'll have it slowed down a little bit for it. Let's see, we'll take this one. Alright. So we'll have this one, which is just going to be jump from crouch. Alright. So, we have our three types. We've got a jump enabled, run, and a crouch. And each one provides a different speed. Let's go ahead and set in place the next part. Now, if you remember, what we have right now is, just like before, we have a direction. We don't have a defined direction yet. So, just like with the movement, is that with each of the movements we had to actually check for the move direction and place that in. Well, we can do that similar to how we did the crouching. We can actually provide one crouch direction and then use all of the different jump types, and then do another crouch direction, use all the same ones as well, just with the different directions on it. Alright, so let's go ahead and finish off our information on the jumps. We'll take into account now with the animation sprite sheets here. So let's just let me grab one of these. Alright. Okay, so with the first one, this is going to be the standard jump. We'll go ahead and, in terms of direction, we'll start off with just the left direction. So with the standard jump, we've got 16, 16, 11, 3, and 4, and then just because the frames aren't as long, we'll go with just 12 for it. Alright, so this will be a standard jump in the left direction. Alright, and then we'll go ahead and copy this one. Alright, so next one, this is going to be, oh, did we put this in the wrong spot? Let's see. Jump on that one, if enabled. Yeah, we did. Or I did. Let's see. Okay. Let's go ahead and put that one there. And put this one over here. So hopefully they didn't get you too lost here. I just had it in the wrong spot for the jump up button instead. The jump up button actually is going to have a different one that we can set up a little bit later. Alright, let's just focus on the actual jump ones here. So for the enabled, again, the regular enable is going to be 16, 16, the 11, 3, 4, and 12. For the next jump type, the run jump enabled, we can actually have the same animation. If you check out the animation sprite sheet, there's about 3 or 4 different types of animation jumps. We're going to go with the same one for the first two, the standard jump and the run. For the crouch though, just so that it shows differently, we'll go ahead and set up a different one for this. For the crouch jump, just do the 16, 16, but then for the column we'll do 12, and then the other will be 11, 4, and 12. So we'll do 11 right here. Alright, and then 4 and 12 on that. Now if we have this, I could go ahead and just save this, and we go over here and we'll be able to play the jumps. They're only going to be on the left direction. So if I was to turn the character and jump, he's going to look natural while he jumps. Notice the hand moves up when he jumps. If we crouch down and jump, he plays a different jump animation. Notice he's like jumping higher and just pulling back like that. Alright, and then if you're running and jumping, this can be that same run jump animation. Now we don't have anything set up for the right hand side, so when he jumps, he's going to look to the left and jump. Okay? So, let's go ahead and set up the move direction for that. Since we know that all of these currently, the current ones, which would be from jump enabled down to crouch jump. All of this is going to be inside of our move direction. So we could just go in here and make one big if statement. We could say if move direction, and we'll say that if move direction is equal to 0, which is looking to the left, then we just want to take everything that's inside of here all the way down to here. Alright. So with all of that, we'll go ahead and just select all of this and tab in once. And we'll move these back in to make them even. Alright, so what we have at the moment then is that if the character is in the air, if the move direction is equal to 0 to the left, then play all of these. And then we can actually copy all of this. You can type it as well if you want. You can take all of this. We'll just push Control C to copy. And we'll paste all of this in. Now, this time though, we'll say that if move direction on this one is going to be equal to 1, meaning to the right. And we'll go ahead and comment on that. Move direction right. Then we're going to say that if jump is enabled, so again, when you push the jump button, it doesn't care, but because the move direction is stored separately. So if the jump is enabled and it is to the right, then we'll still play the same speed. We just have to change which animation direction is playing. So for the standard jump one, it's going to be 16, 16, 11, 2. And the other will be 4 and 12. The first two will be the same, so we'll just do 2 and 2 on here. And then for the crouch one though, crouch one we'll go ahead and do the 16, 16, 12, and then we'll just change to 10, and it'll be the 4 and 12 after that. So change that one to 10, and this will set us up now so that it actually captures the right direction. That way when we jump, the player stays in the right way facing it. So now when he's facing this way, he jumps that way. When he's facing this way, he jumps this way. If he's crouching and jumps, crouching and jumps. Alright? And then the same thing for running and jumping. So now he is completely set up for his movement, his runs, his jumps, his crouch jumps, and facing the right way, playing the right animation. Alright, so that gives us just about everything we need for that part. We're going to do a little bit more tweaking here in just a little bit, but let's go ahead and make sure we've got the right labels on this. For the animation parts with this, let's go ahead and be sure that it's checking at least inside of here, like inside of each one of these. It's kind of easy to get lost because they're labeled the same. So when you're looking at some of them, it might be a good idea to actually just kind of write down that it's it's actually left movement or right movement. So we'll just start up here. Make sure we just start commenting here. Let's say jump left, or actually let's see. We'll do facing left, and then jump left standard, and then we'll just do walk left speed. This one would be let's see, run jump left, and we've also got the crouch. Let's see, jump from crouch left. Alright, and you could also be more specific if you want to start everything with left and follow it up that way. You can certainly do that. So he's facing right at this point, and we're going to do a jump right standard, walk right, and run jump right, speed, and run from crouch right. Alright, so that should give us what we need for there. That'll work. Okay, so at this point, we now have the character doing quite a bit of stuff. If you notice, something to point out, I haven't actually talked about it yet, we've just been doing lots of if statements. This would definitely be the easiest way for a first-time programmer to figure out how to make the character do something. However, there's also, when it gets a little bit more complicated, you're going to be looking at states, and you want to find out what state the character is in, and then you want to call up the whether it's an animation script file or whether it's a different file or different part, you could call it up. Also, every one of these could actually be different functions. So, for instance, when he does the jump, it's just simply a jump function, and you would call that up. Usually when you want to make really good clean code, everything's a function outside the update, and in the update you just call up player animations or player controls, and that's the only function you call that has everything else inside it. Alright, so let's go ahead and double check through here. I think we are pretty much, we'll go ahead and delete that one. We're pretty much finished with the basic setup here. We'll finish a couple more comments and then we'll be done with this part and we'll start up on another part. So again, this one being the variables, we'll just say that this is, let's see, toggle for jump standard, and toggle for run jump, and toggle for crouch jump. Alright, and we'll do a couple more of these comments here. This one, we're going to do, let's see, play to animation sprite. And set controller to the characters controller. Okay. Have anything else through here? This one is on the ground. And we'll just say this can be resetting, so reset jumps. And we'll go ahead and use the same for all three of those. Alright. And we'll go ahead and make these toggle over just so they're even with everything else. Alright. Looks like we've got all of the labels set in place. We've got our comments going nice and down the row. We need a couple more areas right here for commenting. We'll comment. And again, while I'm commenting, just go ahead and start commenting your code. If you don't know how to label it, then you could use this one, but also kind of think through it. Just think about what's happening on the code side and how best to call it up so that on the comment side you can read it and understand what's going on. Because the main thing for comments is to really make it readable for you, especially if you're the only programmer. If it's in a team, you may want to make sure it's even more clear. For this one though, we're just setting the Y value on this one to walk jump, and we're making sure that we can send access to the jump standard. So we'll just say enable jump standard, and we're setting the Y to the run jump. And we'll enable run jump. And you could even place, if you know it's going to be a certain variable, a number, you could place the number down there just so that someone doesn't have to look up above to actually find it. So if player is in the air, and at this point we're getting we're going to get, well, we'll just say set the X, or the horizontal speed from input. Okay. There we go. So most everything's commented down through there. And that'll help us if we're coming back to this a week later or 2 weeks later. We should be able to just kind of read up on it, know what's going on. Looks like everything else is pretty much cleaned up. So we'll go ahead and call this part finished off. The next thing that we'll do with it is go back through and add a little bit more feature side, meaning like particles, sound effects, and things like that.